Alright, hi folks. I'm out and about with the wife. I got a few minutes, so I'm going to do a video for you. See how this sound works with this microphone. There's one of those big gas guzzling trucks nearby rumbling, but it's the sound of freedom. Okay, so this video is called Private Art, Bitcoins, and NFTs. And pretty much just about the delusion of value in general. Okay, so I, been thinking about Bitcoin for a long time, trying to articulate it to myself, reading a lot of data from a lot of different sources, just trying to figure out what people think it is. Because it's just strange when something appears out of nowhere and everybody's like, this is valuable. Well, why is it valuable? And you just can't get a clear answer. And it's the same thing with money and even gold. Why is this gold valuable? Like, what can it do? Well, you can trade it for anything. But intrinsically, why are people willing to trade things that are actually utilitarianly useful for colored rocks? And it comes down to rareness and just the symbol for rareness. True rareness, the rarest things in the world hold value for some reason. And there's a line of spiritual markation that gets hit somewhere that's very hard to articulate, which is why it's just so easy to cover up with illusions. So in my search for how to articulate what Bitcoin is, this is the best thing I've come across. And it's by a guy named Stephen Deal, which seems like a false name, like a fake name, like even Stephen Deal, like an even deal, like I'm just a guy that's trying to get to the bottom of what an even deal is, maybe. Or maybe his name is really Stephen Deal. Anyway, he says, let's have a frank discussion about Bitcoin hype. Bitcoin is really a symptom of the problems of our area, of a post-truth world awash in crack pottery and a breakdown of trust in our institutions. First, cryptocurrencies absolutely aren't currencies. They are sort of a pseudo-asset in the sense that all people do is speculate on its price movements with the expectation of a return on investment. Which is pretty much why all Bitcoiners ever do is just talk about its price in US dollars, because there is literally nothing else to talk about. There's no additional structure to the asset other than what someone else will pay for it currently. This is very different than trading other products like bonds or equities. Companies actually do an economic activity. They build cars, they fabricate semiconductors, cook burgers, etc. You can value normal financial products in terms of the risk associated with their future cash flows and get some approximation for what they are worth on the market. Bitcoin has no structure or future cash flows. It is simply a greater fool investment. You only buy them to sell them to someone who is a greater fool than you and will pay more for it. Trading these kinds of product is a purely negative-sum activity. If you factor in the market making and transactions on top of the zero-sum musical chairs, trading it statistically has a negative expected return. Sure, some people will make money, however, you'll never hear about the ones that don't, everything one winner is necessarily paid out by multiple losers. The reason Bitcoiners take out advertisements on the subway and engage in conspicuous consumption is to increase the pool of fools, so that those who bought in early can cash out in US dollars. The whole structure of this project is just a wealth redistribution derived from fleecing others and convincing them to buy into this get-rich scheme, which is why these people are so vocal in touting the investment and act like rabid cultists. The whole brand of this scheme depends on public perception that it is actually some crazy future tech that you have got to get in early on or miss out. And it cloaks itself in this techno-libertarian narrative about financial independence from the state. The reality is simply the same story. Conmen and hucksters have been selling throughout human history. Money for nothing, out of nothing. Just get in early, don't ask where it comes from, If you peel back the slick marketing and the technical obscurantism, you're confronted with a simple, inescapable cash flow question. Where will all the money come from to pay out all these new paper Bitcoin millionaires? The answer is simple. They need it to come from you. Now let's discuss the environmental cost of Bitcoin, because despite all the push for sustainable green investment in the tech sector, there's a giant smoldering Chernobyl sitting at the heart of Silicon Valley, which a lot of investors would prefer that you remain quiet about. TLDR on Bitcoin economics. It's a pyramid-shaped investment scheme backed by the collective delusion that value can be created out of nothing by convincing greater fools to buy it after you do. That alone is sufficiently a foul on its own merits, but on top of this, the environmental damages of Bitcoin are enough to make even Greta Thunberg weep at the pointless waste of it all. The underlying technology of Bitcoin is based on the notion of mining, a technical term for a process that keeps the network running and processing transactions. I won't cover the details of the algorithm. Suffice it to say, the premise of Bitcoin mining is to prove how much power you can waste. And the more power you can waste, the more tokens you can probabilistically secure in exchange for your energy waste. And so people have set up entire warehouses of computer hardware dedicated to run 24/7, consuming power and performing the trial computations required by the protocol. Globally, this consumes nation-state levels of energy to keep it all running. Bitcoin mining is essentially a fucked up version of Candy Crush, where you solve puzzles for coins, except the coins go to buy darknet fentanyl, launder money for the warlords, and provide gambling for hedge fund managers. The scale of this waste has some scary numbers attached to it. A single Bitcoin transaction alone costs 621 kilowatts, or 500,000 times more energy consumption than a credit card payment. That doesn't mean a lot to me right now. That sounds bad, but I don't know how to verify that stuff. The Bitcoin network annually wastes 78 terawatt hours annually, or the energy consumption of several million U.S. households. Wolfram Alpha gives some scary comparisons to help you relate to how much energy this is. Think nuclear weapons. Okay, well, when I think nuclear weapons, I don't think anything, so that doesn't mean anything. Unlike other economic activities, the Bitcoin scheme produces absolutely nothing for all this waste. It is a pure speculative activity of people gambling on the random movements of prices, and the only output is simply shuffling numbers around in a computer at an insane cost. In addition to energy waste and CO2 emitted, the mining process itself requires constant replacement of hardware and produces a steady stream of waste from broken and exhausted computer parts, all of which are full of toxins and rare earth metals. The network produces 11.27 kilotons of waste annually, or 96 grams of electronic waste per transaction. This is the equivalent annual e-waste of several small countries and equivalent to the waste of 500,000 people living at the German standard. Maybe this guy's German. Try to imagine a future where paying for your morning coffee involves smashing an iPhone and burning enough fossil fuels to run the entire household for 60 days. That's the environmental cost of the revolutionary technology behind Bitcoin in a nutshell. Climate scientists have estimated that Bitcoin emissions alone could push global warming. Okay, now this narratives are getting... It's like the two false narratives are competing against each other now. I didn't know this was going to get in climate change, but it's a good segue to start out with the truth and then slide right into another psyop. Climate change is not some abstract threat happening elsewhere. It is very real and is happening everywhere we choose to invest in. Everywhere we choose to invest in unsustainable and wasteful technology. The absurd waste of Bitcoin is simultaneously both an environmental and moral disaster. As a final aside, this is very politically solvable. In the next administration, Biden could stop the Bitcoin waste problem with the stroke of a pen. Banning U.S. persons from trading these digital investment contracts is well within the powers of the executive branch. I do believe that. And based on how Biden's group, whatever it is, how invested they are in Bitcoin, or how much it would help whichever warlords to not be involved in that game and just be involved with the US dollar, that remains to be seen. But I thought that was a good little bit about Bitcoin. And then where does the NFT come into this? And in my mind, it's kind of similar. It's just like all art used to be part of the church. You went to the church, that's where the paintings, that's where the good music was. And all literature, had to have some kind of spiritual, moral theme running through it if it was allowed to be publicly consumed. The idea of private art is kind of like the Bitcoin. It's where the aristocracy, at some point when they started to become less noble than they should have been, they were like, all this entertainment needs to be part of the king's court. And some of this art needs to be just for us. We're the special boys. And that's where this huge gap in the price of art started to happen. It's like instead of hiring people to paint the churches beautifully for people to come have spiritual experiences with, the aristocracy was like, come make a private picture for my bedroom that only I can enjoy. And then because the people knew that there was a special piece of art in the rich boy's house that only he got to enjoy, that created this desire for it. That created this market for it, which never should have been. The whole art for profit thing is complicated, but it's kind of similar to the Bitcoin in that, why is art valuable? We can't even really say where it comes from. Some people that do run their little computers all the time, they will stumble on the algorithms that will produce a piece of satisfying art. And if a rich enough person pays enough for it and takes it away from the public, there's just going to be this desire to see it, but it's manufactured. And that's what the Bitcoin is. It's what money is in general. In a rural family community, self-sustaining, you don't have money. Everybody kind of knows the value of everything, of most of the kinds of work and most of the kinds of materials and objects available. And so a barter system is a much healthier and accurate way to trade. So yeah, private art, money, Bitcoin, NFT, stay away from those illusions. Real value comes from your ability to serve God, your family, and your community.